welcome to another episode of the Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. Folks, when we look at our lives, things take unanticipated turns, and sometimes it's catastrophic in the initial experience of it. And one way to begin to frame what we might consider to be catastrophic events is to look at them through the lens of an unexpected opportunity. And it's that unexpected opportunity lens that I want to play with a little bit today, because whether you run a business, whether you're in a business as an employee, you have all kinds of stuff that is going on. I mean, things will, all of a sudden the best laid plans, just get thrown out the window. And now what do we do? COVID was a great example of that. Unexpected opportunities, and the folks that actually played with, just use COVID again as the example, played with COVID as an unexpected opportunity. And I know that's something that I certainly did. Were able to reinvent themselves in some very interesting way, in oftentimes ways, plural. My guest today, Alex Sabbag, is going to talk to us a little bit about, excuse me, I'm going to put us on pause here just a little bit. Where do I put pause? I'll just keep going. I'll edit it out. Just something flew in. It's a little dry here on the coast. Okay. Sabag. Yep. Sabbag. Okay. My guest today, Alex Sabbag, has got a story about this. She's got a book that we're going to do a deep dive in. But I want to look at, again, and I invite you as you listen today to listen through the lens of what are the unexpected opportunities in your life that you may have defaulted to calling a catastrophe, or something that I didn't want, or it's unwarranted, it's not fair. I mean, all of those sorts of appellations, that don't really serve us, because, when we start thinking in that way, we get stuck. And that kind of thinking, that, it's happening to me thinking, lends itself to the experience of being powerless. It truly does. So, without minimizing, oftentimes a catastrophic event, it is happening for me in one way. If I look through it through the lens of an unexpected opportunity. So, Alex, I want to welcome you to the show. She's a best-selling author, speaker, two-time business owner, and entrepreneur. She's got a book out, and I mentioned this. We're going to do a deep dive in this. It's called Soul Dive: My Journey into the Deep. And it's her story, personal story, of resilient triumph in and outside of the studio. She's got a yoga studio, Soul Dive Yoga, that is just a very special place. You're going to want to check it out, particularly if you're in the Palm Desert area. So I'm going to really narrow the geographic niche here. But if you're in that area, that's going to be something that you're going to want to play with. So, Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here. I appreciate you having me.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. Before we get into, the catalyst for you writing your book and beginning this journey, the question I always ask is right at the front end here. When you hear the term "the soul of business," what does that bring up for you? What's the
one word that comes up, and this was such an easy answer for me, is purpose.
Purpose.
It's all
Okay.
about purpose. And I think we can look at life in all these different buckets: our personal life, our professional life, romantic life, etc. And work is often this very black and white, transactional, like just cookie cutter experience for us, where we wake up and punch the clock, as so many people do, and like go home, and it's wildly unfulfilling, and we don't even know if we love it, and we forget that we actually signed up for the job in the first place. And I think when we flip the script on that and say, what are you supposed to be doing here? What is your purpose? What is your calling? The soul starts to get infused back into your business.
Great. I love that. Now, I'm going to kind of follow that thread here a little bit. When I ask people, what's your purpose? Oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes it kind of stumps them a little bit. Mm-hmm. And it invites the use of the imagination. If you knew what it was, what would you imagine it being, sort of a thing. And the reason I mark that out, Carl Jung, and listeners of the show have heard me say this before, but Carl Jung, the philosopher and psychologist, said at one point in time that the imagination lives at the threshold of the soul. And when you can begin to really play with imagination, it does evoke something else. There's an aliveness that begins to peek its head above everything else, going, is it safe to come out?
Yeah.
And that's the idea that I want to explore here a little bit with you, because you actually had a fairly significant tragedy in your life that you were able to turn around in a very significant way. So if you don't mind, can we jump right into that and
Yeah,
talk about that a
absolutely.
bit?
Um,
Okay.
on my 33rd birthday, my fiance was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. And he was my boyfriend of 9 months and got diagnosed on my actual birthday. And then the next day he proposed. This is I mean, there's no leads buried in the book, by the way. Like, it is a gut wrenching first chapter. And I promise you won't stay down in the weeds of misery. But this is what I coined a 2x4 moment. And the 2x4 moment is one of those things that slaps you so hard upside the head that you cannot see straight. You woke up one way and you went to bed another. And we've all had them. And it doesn't matter how old you are or how many relationships you've had or had fail. Or how many jobs you've lost or how many times you've picked up and moved across the country or whatever it is. Something has altered your life in a massive way. And in that point, you have a choice. And how you choose to move through that experience really dictates the trajectory of the rest of your life, which follows.
Right.
And so for me, this was obviously one of the most unexpected things that has ever happened. And I got a pretty long resume of unexpected things. Okay. Like, I can't sit here and say you'll have a blow and then they stop coming. I mean, in the human experience, all I can guarantee you is that they do continue to come. We just have to sort of learn how to ride the wave with a little more equanimity in the process. But for me, this was really, kind of one of those things that lifted the mirror up to my face and said, who are you and what are you doing here? And as much as this was about, his life, literally this life and death experience, he did pass to a little over 2 years ago. It was really, for me, if you just look at my side of the street, it was a wake up call. It was more than I think there's subtle taps and there's whispers from angels and there's like, hey, you should see something a little like over here. Just pay attention to something that's going on. And we're like, nope, we're too busy. I don't want to hear that message. We ignore it. And then we ignore things for so long. And then they come back and they really slap us until we're starting to pay attention. And so this was really the moment when I kind of had to let life as I knew it completely burn to the ground so I could figure out who the heck I am and what I'm supposed to be doing here.
That idea of burning to the ground. There's a phrase around, and I forget exactly who the speaker was on this, the dark night of the soul. I've come to believe that there's no such thing as a dark night. There's no such thing as a dark night of the soul. The soul is, it's always bright and alive. There's a dark night of the ego, where the ego has to dissolve in order for, in some way, shape, or form, in order for the soul to be able to come back to life and express itself. Now, that's my kind of take on that particular phrase. What part of your ego did you find dissolving as you started looking at not being held by what's happened, but casting a direct and being informed by what's this future? What could it be? And not have it be discolored by what has happened, but maybe having it, highlighted by what has happened.
Well, I would like to think, oh, look, I had this beautiful ego death and, then emerged this perfect.
The chrysalis, yes.
Like, I did not go to the woods and take a bunch of ayahuasca and have this transformative 2-day experience. I mean, this was a 5-year burn period that was highly unpleasant. And the things that made it was bad. I mean, the situation's bad, right? We can't put, and I totally had rosy colored glasses on where I was like, oh, you have a 1% chance of living. I'm the woman for the job. Like, I got it. I'm going to find the thing. I can save you, and where that all comes from is control. And the control comes from this fight or flight. And so when the incident happens and we're not taught to take a pause and understand that we do have a choice, we react. And I think most of us are pretty familiar with this concept of like kind of the knee-jerk reaction or the initial fight or flight. You either stay and you battle it out, which I did, or you run away. And I'm not a runner. I never have been, and I'm still not. When these moments come up, I'm a double down type of a gal. And by doing that, I refuse to kind of admit the reality. And that was not only harmful for me in like totally being dishonest with myself about what was going on, but it really wasn't that fair to him either. And I think so often when we get in the room with somebody, it might be their diagnosis, but it's yours too in a different way. And if you're fooling yourself and you're like, oh, it's fine, everything's going to be fine, and you can't really admit that it's not fine and that it may not be fine, you're doing a disservice to both of you. And so that was kind of my reality for a little bit. And that was a tough, the caregiving was, yes, it was selfless, and I chose to do it out of pure, big love is what I call it. I mean, I've never loved somebody, nor have I had somebody love me the way that man loved me in that relationship. And I would do it all over again, but I would definitely do it differently. And I think this whole concept of like, don't bullshit yourself. And the quicker you can just get to the truth and live in that raw, uncomfortable vulnerability and authenticity, the quicker you can get, to what's real. Because when you're not dealing with what's real, you're creating this alternate reality for yourself that isn't going to show up because it's not really here. And we do it in so many different areas of our life, but that's, that was a really big one for me. And it was all under this, like this veil of control.
Yeah. Some people are going to probably get their knickers in a knot around this, but there's very little we control in life. As a matter of fact, there's almost nothing we control in life except our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors. Yeah. I
mean, if you can control your thoughts, you're way ahead of most. I can't control mine. I mean, I'm a lunatic upstairs half the time. I just have a good toolbox that hopefully isn't collecting too much dust.
Yep. Yeah. And that idea of authenticity, it's, what I'm left with when I stop trying to take care of you, what I'm left with when I stop trying to impress you or manage your perception of me, but all of which come down to control. And when I let go of that, authenticity emerges. And what's I think important about that is now I'm in the present. Now, to your point, I'm dealing with what is.
Yep.
And when I'm dealing with what is, there I've got some leverage. I can not deny it, but now I can not be held captive by it because I haven't recognized it. When I can put it outside, label it, call it what it is, now that frees up a whole lot of energy.
Yep.
And so in that 5-year journey that you had with Matt, there was a lot of learning, I'm certain, that went on with that. And I know, my late wife, she passed about 10 years ago. No, 14 years ago now. 14 years ago. That was a journey that I experienced where at first there was just complete denial. It's kind of like, well, no, this we're going to get past this. Don't worry about it. And that doesn't work real well. No. Businesses do this all the time when all of a sudden there's a black swan event that occurs and markets disappear or a new competitor comes in and life as we knew it changes dramatically. And like you said, who I woke up today with, being is not the same person I went to sleep with, as at the end of the day. What if there was a catalyst for you, and not necessarily in the journey with Matt, but if there was a catalyst, as you look back on this period, is there a single thing that stands out that you can use as an example of a stepping stone that kind of got you started in a different way?
Yeah, I would say there were two really big things that saved me in that period of time. And number one, I'm a woman of faith. I was raised in the church. I continue to practice. I am currently in my real time life. I'm a little pissed at Jesus right now, but I still acknowledge, what's up. But the day to day was really about yoga. And here's why. I had a yoga practice. I've had a very, a 20-year, journey with yoga that I actually hated in the very beginning. And I totally understand why people do hate it when they arrive on the yoga mat for the first couple times. I get it. I'm 5'10". I can't reach it. I don't know where my right foot is, and I definitely know where my left hand is, and it's very complicated. And I feel like 5'1" gymnasts were the only teachers I was finding. Very, very disenchanted by that whole experience. However, I continued to go, and I became a member and a kind of fixture as part of the yoga community in the West Loop of Chicago. And it was just something that was there. It was very physical. I was younger. I loved hot power yoga. I have different feelings about that part of the practice today.
Yeah.
But it was like my thing. And after the diagnosis, the first place I went publicly was the yoga studio. And the teacher that was there, I was early to class. I was obviously a mess and emotional. She noticed my ring and she was like, "Oh my God, you're engaged." And I was like, "He's dying," and just like broke down. And she did not hug me. She didn't pity me. There was no there, little girl. She gave me a permission slip that I will never forget. And that was that this was my home away from home. And I could show up in any way, shape, or form that I was in the moment to simply be there, just to keep coming. Whether I laid there and cried on my mat for an hour or did every move or flailed around like Free Willy, it didn't matter. It just mattered that I walked through the door. And as a 33-year-old woman who had owned a PR company for some years and felt like I was very raised by Chicago and an entrepreneur and trying to make a name and all the rest, I had never been given a permission slip like that, ever.
That's quite a gift.
Whole thing stuck with me and I kept going. And it was, I would take him to his daily radiation treatments during this whole standard of care process. And we'd go home and I knew that he would sleep soundly enough for an hour where I could get out and that we were good. We were covered. I didn't need somebody there at the house or whatever. And it was like sort of during that time period where I had no power. I had no strength. I was like withering away as a human. But it was kind of in those moments that yoga's higher power really struck. And I think it was then or before that the seeds for what is now Soul Dive Yoga were really starting to get planted, because yoga is really not about this like physical fitness and how hot can you make the room and how intensely can you push your body. I mean, some of that stuff's fun. And like, I'm in San Diego, there's more hot yoga here than you can shake a stick. But I don't think that's what saves you when you talk about, that catalyst for healing. I think it is about showing up. I think it's about taking the space. It's about being quiet. It's about letting something else come into your reality that's not, death or cancer or this life, altering experience. It's about you. And it's about those few moments that you take where you drop out of your life and you drop in to you. And that is truly what the meaning of Soul Dive is. And whether that's 10 seconds or an hour or your night's sleep, or a nap, it doesn't really matter. It's just a little break. It's a reprieve.
Yeah.
And so as I moved forward in, my entrepreneurial journey and I moved to California, I had no intention of owning a yoga studio because, the profit margin on that business is not great. If you didn't know. I was the chief marketing officer of an insurance technology company when I moved, and was like, great, I'm going to work for somebody else. I bought this beautiful house that I'm sitting in right now on the bluff, on the beach. I'm going to start over in this cute little beach town. And literally the day I got fired from that position was the day somebody emailed me with a lease and said, you should take a look at this. And that lease is now Soul Dive Yoga in Palm Desert.
Hi, I'd like to ask you to do something for me if you wouldn't mind. If you like this episode, I'd like you to not only subscribe on your favorite site, but I'd also like you to give a rating. Ideally, a 5-star rating would be greatly appreciated. But I think more importantly also would be just some comments. That helps with the algorithm and it helps build the audience with this. And more than anything else, if you could invite somebody else to listen, just share this episode with a friend, with a colleague. And I'd like to see how we can grow the soul of business. I think it makes a difference. Thanks. The universe works in a very interesting manner. It certainly does.
Yep.
Yeah.
It really does.
So you founded the Soul Dive 2 years ago, I believe,
Yep,
correct?
just over
Yeah,
2 years ago.
just over 2 years ago. And the book Soul Dive: My Journey into the Deep,
Yep.
was that done after the founding of the studio, or had you begun actually kind of formulating it before that?
Um, Great question, two-part answer. Number one, I've always known that I have a book in me. And from
Hmm.
my, early 20s, my mom was like, you've just got to write. Like you have a gift, write a blog, do something. And I probably could have had the most amazing Sex in the City dating expose blog that ever lived. And I got to tell you, the content for that thing, ooh, it just keeps coming. Um, but I was never energetically pulled to do that. And I think the reason why is there was no depth. Like it's funny and it's entertaining, and I can be self deprecating with the humor if I'm at a girls' dinner or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, that didn't feel like enough of a platform or a storyline opportunity for me to really share. And so I never did it. I never picked up a pen. I never shared. And it wasn't until it was actually not even a year ago when I started writing the book. So it's
Okay.
probably, well, we're recording this in mid-December. So it was probably about a year ago that I started to put pen to paper, worked with a consultancy on self-publishing my memoir and getting this thing done. So soup to nuts, it was about a 4-month turnaround time.
That's
Um,
really quick.
well, totally. I mean, when I drop into what I'm supposed to do, though, like I go in. And I
Yeah.
think that's the thing with purpose, and kind of to bring it back to your question, when you're supposed to be doing it, you just will.
Yeah.
There is no
Yeah.
resistance. Life is complicated. I mean, at the time I was in a relationship that was fairly unfulfilling. I had a very, very old dog who also needed about 24/7 care. My house that I'm sitting in right now had water damage. I was totally displaced. And when I'm in the desert, I'm in the like casita of my parents' house. And so you want to talk about, and I had a new business. The business was just a year old. You want to talk about chaos and roadblocks. And I had a million reasons why that book wouldn't have gotten done,
Hmm.
but it got done, and it got done really well, and it got done fast, and with with very little coming up to distract or block me. It just went.
It just went. Well, let's talk a little bit about the book. Soul Dive: My Journey into the Deep. Yeah, yeah, it is a memoir.
It is.
There you go. Yeah, hold it up there, because those of you that are going to be watching this, not on iTunes or any of the
Yeah,
other regular platforms, but go to my YouTube channel and you'll see it. Spotify, actually, I think Spotify is hosting a video version of this as well. So
it'll be
um,
a YouTube channel too.
there you go. Okay. Yes, it will be.
Yeah.
I'll be sending you the link on this.
Yep.
Talk, what, outside of, the most obvious component to it, what are you most proud of in the book?
Oh, that's hard. I think number one, doing it, like just doing it. I did it. It's done. I'm proud of the entire product. I feel very inspired. Like I like my own I like my own content, like
Yeah, that's
I
good.
should probably, go back and read it again. And not that I haven't read it 800 times, but and learn from me in those, poetic wisdom drop moments. And it would probably serve me really, really well in this season of my life. But I think there were many, many things that I was dealt as a young adult. I mean, this was published when I was 38. So,
Hmm.
um, no, 39. How old am I? I'm 39. Okay. Yeah, published when I was 39. So I got it done before I was 40. And, but that's young, to have a
Yeah.
terminally ill fiance, to move across the country, to get fired and end up with a yoga studio. I was sexually harassed by the CEO of one of the businesses I worked for. And I have a blended family with half siblings and, interesting dynamics. And that's all in there. And I
Yeah.
think, it's shared in a way where it's very raw, it's very honest, and it's vulnerable. And the vulnerability thing is worth stopping at for a moment. I think just as a whole, as humans trying to get through it all, we're craving it. But we're
Hmm.
all kind of standing in this like human existence circle, looking around saying, who's going to go first?
Yep.
And I think what I did here is say, all right, fine, I'll lead. I'll go. And when I do, and when I was sharing in so many rooms, coast to coast over the last 6 months on this book tour, what was happening is people saying, oh, I get it. This was my experience, or mine was a little different, but I feel that. And we realize that we're now connecting not on apples to apples experiences, but on these emotions that sit underneath them, because that's what it means to be human. And that was, I'm insanely proud of the book tour and just being able to pull it all off. Like I have a startup business and I self-funded and planned and produced not only the book, but the tour, and hit California, New York, and a bunch of places in between. So,
and the book is a bestseller. So
the bestseller. And I got to tell you, book number 2 is already, it's already on its way.
I was going to ask you about that. I was going to ask. Yeah.
Because all we really have to do is get up and live our lives. And it seems that the content just keeps flowing.
It's strange how that works. Totally
all the people that are contributing to my, next week.
Thank you for coming into my life here.
Totally. Right? We have to flip it to gratitude because, we can be a little irritated in the moment, of which I highly identify with. But at the end of the day, it's like, all right, well, this is a great teaching moment.
Yep.
Don't worry, I'll change your name.
Names and faces have been changed to protect the innocent.
Totally.
Yeah. That idea of vulnerability. An old mentor of mine years ago said that we connect through vulnerability. And as far as he was concerned, that was the only way that people connected, was through vulnerability. I mean, truly connected. Otherwise, It was more along the lines of cordial hypocrisy. Go along to get along sort of a thing. Mm-hmm. The idea of vulnerability, and I'm gonna take you back to the time that between Matt's diagnosis and his ultimate passing. Where did vulnerability, or how did vulnerability, or did vulnerability come into your conversational domain?
Well, at first it didn't, because I was under the impression as an early 30s business owner that I needed that whatever I was advertising, my facade and how I presented to the world was it. Yep. Like that is the face that needs to go out. And, how true it was or how authentic it was did not matter. It was, to present in a certain way. And I can be embarrassed by that, or I can say that I've learned from it as I've gotten older. But the conversation now around it is very, very different. But I was in a big city. My company at the time was, we were an all-female company, but I worked in philanthropy. So these boardrooms were older men in suits. So like we had to show up in a certain way.
Yep.
And there was kind of no crying in baseball.
Exactly.
around that. And so that's how I was raised, professionally raised, was to be strong and independent. And tell you what, has not solely served me in my personal life.
Don't let them see you sweat.
Yeah, but successful in business. So I didn't. I mean, everything was fine. We're going to get through it. Thanks for your concern, but we're good here. And one of the things I did that was a real weakness was push away support in so many different ways. I mean, people offered, how can we help? What can I do? I would sometimes know what I needed and it would show up, but never mind, I got it. Yeah. And I didn't have it. It was a full-time job. I mean, so many full-time jobs of driving and cooking and coordinating and travel. I mean, the whole thing was just, and being wildly overwhelmed in the whole process. So in the beginning, it simply wasn't there. And because it wasn't there, actually inspired how I chose to plan and produce the book tour, which I'll get to. But over time, as we lived together for 6 months of his diagnosis, and then he went to live with his parents. Mm-hmm. And I think as the relationship started to unravel, we didn't get married. It just was a bleak, it was not right.
Yeah.
I think as that reality started to set in, the walls would kind of would come down. And I don't know how eloquent the vulnerability or authenticity was, but it was transparent. So at
Yeah.
least I started to get to the point where I could tell the truth. And if I were to meet somebody or eventually go on a date or whatever, and people would say, well, why are you single? I'd be like, well, he's dying. And like, that was unfair because people are very unprepared to hear that, and
Yeah.
so there's a lot of kind of roughness that followed my kind of trajectory as I went on. But, it felt like there was just kind of this 5-year cycle of letting everything go. I mean, everything, my hometown, my business, my friends, my relationships, my hobbies, my day-to-day, the whole thing just like had to go. And I don't think it needed to take that long, but I think I was still controlling and gripping so hard that I was like, this
Guaranteed.
outcome is going to come, darn it, because I'm determined and I'm strong and that's what everybody thinks I am. So I'm going to make it happen. It's just a false narrative. And the quicker we can let go, the faster we can get through. But on the other side of kind of that heaviness wave, things started to soften. And when we can start to feel safe in our own body again, which is no easy task sometimes,
True.
things can become, it's okay for reality to set in, and it's okay to feel maybe a little raw and emotional about it, but safe. And I think the vulnerability now is very second nature because I've come to terms with like not only the experience, but the outcome of it. I mean, there's a lot not to be, thrilled or proud of in those moments. And I know I'm not alone in that, kind of feeling or realness, but I can sit down with people and say, this is really how it was. And it was super ugly. And that all feels, okay. But I think one of the very important lessons I learned when I went through yoga teacher training is we are not put here to share unprocessed experiences. So if your boyfriend broke up with you yesterday and you're leading a yoga class today, you might just want to call some yoga poses. We don't really need to hear from you in your, heartbroken, raw state.
Yeah.
And it was really no different with getting through this. It wasn't time to write the book on the heels of his diagnosis because I couldn't see straight. I didn't know what that was going to mean for my life. And this really is about me. It's not about him, although he's, kind of he's got a little main character energy in this one. But yeah, I think it's okay to give ourselves a little bit of grace after the experience and as we're processing and moving through and beyond it before we can share about it.
Perfect. Yeah. Now, you had alluded to the book tour and just kind of how some of the lessons that you were driving, or pulling from this actually contributed to how because you orchestrated the entire book tour, which is kind of unusual for an author. Usually the publishing house, but publishing has changed so dramatically. I've written 5 books, and the publishing has changed so dramatically since the first time. And book tours, I mean, the last one I did was in Asia, and they ran it for me. I mean, I just had to show up and got writer's cramp signing books, but that's another story entirely. So how did you that experience inform how you actually put together the tour?
So in April, the book was done and kind of sent for final, get uploaded to Amazon, do this whole self-publishing. And I had a team helping me, which was super, super helpful. The big lesson here is we cannot do this alone. Anything. I mean, really, the human experience is not meant to be done in solitude, whether that is a conversation around divine union or partnerships or friendships, romantic relationships, professional, whatever it is, we are not here to do this by ourselves. And as April was kind of coming and the publishing date was May 21st, I was starting to okay, now I have to sell it.
Now what? Yeah. The writing was the easy part.
I'm totally writing. I'm a writer. I've always been a writer. I was like, well, now what am I going to do? And I just sort of got quiet and I sat and I was like, during this whole process, I didn't know how to ask for help. And when help came to me, I pushed it away. And I pushed it away because I said, nobody understands me, because I was looking at the apples to apple. There's no 33-year-old caregiver. You don't know what I'm going through. You don't know what it's like to live with a man on steroids or the death sentence. I mean, all of this, just physically, emotionally, energetically, just pushing it away. And I put myself in isolation. I did that. And it was horrible. And we all get there. And I'll tell you the 3 reasons why I wrote the book too. But this past inspired the tour because I said, I can't do this alone. I need some help. And I know I have an army of people who believe in me who are inspired by my story, who've been cheering me on all these years, who would do whatever I asked, as long as I knew what to ask for. And so I put out an email that said just that. I didn't know how to ask for help, and I didn't know how to receive. And that's a big thing. You can ask
It's
for help, but if
huge.
you're
It's
not ready to
huge.
receive and hold what comes in, it's worthless. And I said, I'm ready, and here's what I need. Planning a book tour. I'll go wherever you are. You agree to host the party, get minimum 20 people together, serve wine, serve a 5-course meal. I don't care what you do. You book it and I'll show up with books. And the response to that email was incredible. I mean, people love it. I truly think people want a reason to celebrate others.
They do.
And they
People
do.
want to celebrate. They want to, they're inspired by, they're inspired by goodness. They're inspired by people that are moving. They're inspired by things that, others would say, God, how is she doing that? Yeah.
Yep.
I want to be a part of that too.
Yeah.
Sort of a thing. Yeah.
And so that was it. I mean, people just said, okay, I'm going to do it and I'm here, and I'm going to do it and I'm there. And I'm like, all right, let's go. And there was a little logistical, sorting out. And it was not easy, and it was still expensive for me to go and make it. It was emotionally taxing. I lost my dog in August. So that was like smack in the middle of this whole thing. But it was really beautiful watching people show up and host me. And the last event was in Chicago, which is, my home. Really, California doesn't really feel like home, but Chicago always will. And it was hosted by Room and Board, which is a big national brand. So Finale, which I know there will be an encore. So P.S. Stay tuned. And it will be international, which I'm also pretty stoked to report. But it was beautiful. And the one thing that I shared at every single signing event was why I wrote the book. And the number one reason is you're not alone. And we experience isolation so often. It breaks my heart. I mean, I still drop into that space sometimes and have to be kind of pulled out of the well and reminded that I'm not alone. But number two, you have to laugh, and life can be so heavy, and you got to get into that light space, even in the midst of so much darkness. And number three, you have to keep going. And it's not the keep going as in like, plow through your experience or bury your trauma or whatever it is, but you have to wake up and put one foot in front of the other and do it day by day so that you can move through it, physically move. Yep.
There's a purpose that I'm called to be that nobody else in the entire universe could ever do. And Marcus Aurelius wrote about this in his book, Meditations, his journal. And I'll butcher the passage, but basically he said, there are times when I just want to pull a cover over my head. The bed is warm and cozy, but I've got something to do. And if I don't do it, nobody's going to do it. Who am I to deny that purpose from actually coming to life in this world? That would get him out of bed.
Yeah.
And away we go. I love those 3 points. And I particularly, there's two areas here that I marked out. Literally, number one, ask. Just be willing to ask for help. The second one is you're not alone. I have never met anybody that has turned down a request for help. They may defer it for a moment, but they're almost always honored that I thought to ask them. For assistance, for ideas, for whatever it is that they might be able to contribute. But to your point here, I didn't know what to ask for oftentimes. And I don't think a lot of people know what to ask for. Yeah. Because they're disconnected from their purpose. When I start getting connected to the purpose, that life force that wants to be expressed, I know what to ask for.
Yep. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Alex, we're out of time here, unfortunately. I want to have you back on the show. I know that there's going to be a sequel here with the book and whatnot. So where can people find out more about you, the book, and what you're up to?
2 places. So for me and my journey as a speaker, and to learn more about my story, my website is soulfulalchemist.com. And through the website, you can buy the book, which is on Amazon, and also sign up for my weekly newsletters. So I put out a newsletter. It's called Into the Deep with Alex. It's a, weekly poetic wisdom drop from me to you. I think the content is outstanding, and I don't think you'll regret getting it, even though I know you get a million emails. So up on my list. Get plugged into my network. I do have some things that are coming up in 2025, potentially working one-on-one with some select individuals, and a retreat that will likely take place in the south of France. So
I love the south of France.
Totally. You can also find me at Soul Dive Yoga, which is in Palm Desert, California. So everybody goes to Palm Springs in the wintertime, like period. No matter where you live in the world, you're coming to the desert. So come check us out. It's souldiveyoga.com. We're on Instagram at Soul Dive Yoga. I'm on Instagram at Alex Sabbag, and I'm excited to connect with you on any and all of those platforms.
Great. Folks, Alex Sabbag has been my guest today. I've loved this conversation. As always, my admonition to you is find a way in your life to be a center of distribution, not a center of accumulation. You'll find your life works a whole lot better when you're working from that premise. And remember, things that happen to us, they are unexpected opportunities. And if you can actually see through that lens, you will find possibilities that you didn't recognize. Until next time, have a good day. And thanks, Alex. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Take care.